People think if you don't have other offers or you're not in a job right now, you have no leverage. It's completely not the case. I have people who have been off the market for 4 months. They have no other offers. I had someone get $200,000 in their first year as an increase without other leverage. Recovery method in any negotiation is any piece of new information, external or internal, can be used to reopen the negotiation. Sometimes budgets that were completely not negotiable at the beginning, all of a sudden completely thrown out the window and you get board approval for some crazy offers at the end. It's the best argument by far I've seen for getting a title bump. If you do a good negotiation, you actually have more respect from the people.
So negotiations, this is your area of expertise. And just in this market, how does one negotiate? What's changed from maybe how they might have negotiated 5 years ago?
Yeah, the main thing that's changed is the market, and the market is only one component of what goes into a negotiation. So what happened, if you look on a timeline, I mapped this out in one of my articles where I analyzed all the offers that you saw at like L6 at Amazon. And it used to be huge variance, tons of above band offers, tons of below band offers, honestly. And then it all compressed down to nearly nothing in 2023. And then it started expanding out. And it's definitely not the same number of offers going out as it used to be. And there's definitely fewer exceptions above bands. But top of band offers are still going out there and they still exist. And I'm seeing that on the ground when candidates are negotiating. Once you get into that spot of the offer round, and especially if you've been able to position yourself as a market of one for that role, then you're going to be able to negotiate quite well. On top of that, there's other types of leverage. There's the basic types of leverage that people know. And then there's some other leverage internally that you can create for yourself. And it's all kind of an information game. So if I were to say stepwise what you do during a negotiation, number one, before you even start your search, you have to prep early, get practice rounds on your interviews, know that what you're going to say in those early conversations with negotiations. But it's mainly about lining up your options and those 3 tiers of company we talked about, the high paying, high leverage companies that you might not go for, but maybe with the right offer, the companies which are your core, and then your top ideal companies. And just make sure you're going to line those up so they're coming in at the right time that you can use each for leverage. Sometimes actually not having an offer, but having an opportunity can be better leverage. So it's not always about, I need to line up all my offers at the same time. Exceptions to that are companies like Google, where they really need to have hard evidence sometimes. But even in those cases, I find opportunities can help. The second thing is you want to handle that first expectations question. So when you're in the recruiter calls early on, and they might ask you this in multiple calls, what are your salary expectations? This is all an information game. And a lot of people will give you advice to, give a range or maybe come in a bit higher than where you were before. You can always change it later. In my experience, that's not the case. If you anchor on something, it's very difficult to come back from that. And even if when we have come back from that, it's a lot of teeth pulling. It doesn't feel as good. It doesn't feel as smooth as when you do price discovery later. You just say, hey, I haven't thought about that. In my experience, there's so much more that goes into compensation than just the numbers. I need to find out more about the role. I also need to go through my other processes. We'll talk about it later. You can ask them for the range for the role. Take it as a grain of salt. Don't agree to it. Just act neutrally whenever you get information. It's just about collecting information that you can use later.
I've been impressed in that interview where they're just like, is this range okay with you? Especially when those down level things are happening. I was a director, but I've just taken this principal interview that happened to me in my last search. What do you think about and how do you handle that when the recruiter presses you on that?
Yeah, certainly. And this definitely does happen. The first thing I try is actually just repeating myself. I will just say, again, I found in my experience that at this point in time, talking about compensation is just not the right thing. Neither of us know whether this is the fit yet. I want to focus on that. Or if they keep pushing, then there are different categories of follow-up objections. And when we coach people, we have this whole list of objection buckets and how to answer those different questions. One of the common ones is dependent on where you are in your search. You might say, I've just started my search. I'm just not familiar with the market rates. You might know better than me. And if they press you, they're like, this is the range. And it doesn't make sense for us to move forward or waste anyone's time if you're not going to tell me this is going to be okay for you. Then at that point, they're pressing you a certain amount. You're going to, in a couched way, say, right now, everything looks good. Let's move to the next phase of the process. And I would love to learn more about finding a role. And I'm sure we'll find something that works for all of us at the end based on what you've told me. And so it's agreeing, but vague. Very rarely have I seen 4th or 5th attempts where they're really pressing. It has happened. It definitely has happened. It's very rare though. And in those cases, if they push you into saying yes for something, then you're going to have to just use the recovery method. And the recovery method in any negotiation is any piece of new information, external or internal, can be used to reopen the negotiation. And yeah, you'll be able to recover later. I'm just trying to tell you how you should set up for the best, smoothest process. It doesn't mean it's impossible. And we often get people who are like, oh yeah, I told them what I made before. And I told them all of this, all the things that you should definitely not tell them. And we've still been able to have good outcomes for them. It's just very difficult. You're coming from a deficit.
Yeah, you should never tell them what you made. Even if they press you on that, you should try to use the avoidance strategies you were just talking about.
Exactly. What you made, what you expect, all of that above. Some executive recruiters have a completely opposite advice, and they're very experienced. So to some degree, they're coming from a good place where they'll say, hey, just be upfront with us. You're not in a junior position anymore. Just tell us. And I know that in my experience, the candidates who know what they want get what they want. The problem is they know what they want, but they don't know if that's the market price in this market for this role. What I find very often is that sometimes the role scope changes by the end of the process. Sometimes budgets that were completely not negotiable, remote policies that were not negotiable at the beginning, all of a sudden completely thrown out the window and you get board approval for some crazy offers at the end. And if you anchor yourself early, then it's going to be harder to ask for those things later. Of course you can, but it just makes it much harder. So that's the handling expectations piece. The third part is you have to build leverage. There's multiple different types of leverage. I call it the merit framework. So the market is part of it. And that includes what is the company going through right now? Did they just have layoffs? Are they having hiring freezes, right? You have to be aware of that. And that's a little bit outside of your control. But the company will have more leverage if they have a very good excuse. For example, if they're a Series B company that's having trouble with fundraising or low in cash, there's only so much they can do there. The second is expertise, and that's where your market of one, your candidate market fit, all of the above come into play. And during that process, it's all about reading the tea leaves and trying to get as much intel about what are the specific pain points about this role that I uniquely can bring my experience forward and say, I have done this, I can do this. And if you're that candidate and you become that candidate, even if you don't have a great brand on your resume, I've seen people throw money, throw titles at people, even if that person's only offer is that opportunity, because that is the person I want for this role, and I'll move mountains to get them. Third is results, just past achievements, quantifying your achievements. The more that you do that, the better opportunity you have. The fourth one is what I call an inventory of your options. And so in that case, it's about what are your other opportunities on the table, other offers, your current job, do you have upcoming equity vesting, those types of things. But I would not reveal most of that information until the end, until you're actually in the negotiations and you package up a very coherent counteroffer strategy. So you don't even do it live on the call the first time when you get the offer. And then tactics. And that's just how you communicate, how you build rapport with people during the process, how you lengthen out the process in some cases, line things up, and build relationships with the decision makers. And that communication tactic part is very important. So that's how you build leverage. And that just dispels the myth. People think you have to have other offers. If you don't have other offers or you're not in a job right now, you have no leverage. It's completely not the case. I have people who have been off the market for 4 months. They have no other offers. We get them 100. I had someone get $200,000 in their first year as an increase without any other leverage other than the internal leverage they built up and their just willingness to ask for it and push. It's definitely possible to negotiate there. So number one, you prep, have everything set up. Number two, you handle the expectations questions. Number three, you build your leverage with the merit framework. And number four is about selling your value. And this happens throughout the process, but especially, like I said, with that 30, 60, 90 plan and that role vision doc and having that conversation with the hiring manager. You get the offer, you're on the offer call, and there's two principles for that call. You act excited about the company and the role, but very neutral about any information you get. If you have a discussion there, you can always ask follow-up questions about details after on email where it's more neutral. You can ask, how did the team come to this decision? Not disappointed, not excited about it, just neutrally, and gather information if you can get it. Then you say, thank you. I never make decisions live on the call. I always bring it back to my family, my mentor, take a night to think about it, and I'll get back to you later. If they're pressing for timelines, just be aware of it, acknowledge it, say, I know that you guys are on a timeline. I'm very aware of that. I have to speak with my family, et cetera, to make the decision first, and then I'll get back to you very timely, and we can organize a time to meet next. Once you bring that back, that's when you ask to have time with the hiring manager and sometimes even the skip manager. After you get that offer and you've bought the time, then you want to have this 30, 60, 90 call. You put the doc together, 30, 60, 90-day plan, vision doc. I'll tell you what goes into that. And you schedule a call with the hiring manager and the skip manager to talk more about the opportunity and your vision for it. And it has two dimensions. It's about negotiation, but it's also an amazing reverse interview process. You put things on paper that people had told you, that the hiring manager told you in there. You put your vision for what the role is going to be, the strategy, the impact that you think it's going to have, the metrics you're going to drive, and then the 30, 60, 90-day plan. Who are the people you met that you're going to have to talk to and get buy-in for? That goes in there. What kind of shipping velocity it is. And then you put discussion items in line and at the bottom to make sure that you say, these are my assumptions. I want to make sure that we're on the same page. When things are on paper, then you're good for the reverse interviewing. If things are on paper, it's very different than in conversation. If they see something on paper, they're going to tell you, oh, actually, no, we're not wrong. And I would say probably 50% of the time that candidates go in and do this 30, 60, 90 plan call with the hiring manager, they realize that the role is not at all what they thought. I had a candidate go in, they were told that they were going to own this part of the ads platform. And they were very clear, I've done that before, that's great, that's why they love me. They went, the hiring manager was, oh, no one told you? Yeah, no, you're totally not doing that. You're doing this other thing, which you're also great for. But then the second part of it is now building that internal leverage for making your offer. And this also is great for getting an up level, which is you show them that you really know what you're doing. You clarify what the impact is. You have them say the impact right there. You say, hey, it looks this is going to unlock this for the strategy. This is going to be an important new product launch. This is the metrics we're going to drive. And then you label it back. When they say it, you mirror it. You say, oh, okay, it sounds this is going to be really important for X. So you're building up their confidence that you're going to have a big impact in the company. If you're negotiating or coming close to an offer sometime soon, then go to feelvalued.co and my company there will be able to take care of you. We've done over 200 of these combined between us and would love to help you get a great offer. And then at the end of that call, then you can either, depending on the size of the company, you can have that compensation discussion with the hiring manager right there and say, hey, will you go to bat for me? I'm going to be asking for XYZ. Or you build the case, you have a call with the recruiting manager and say, hey, we talked about this. I have XYZ other opportunity. We talked about the impact of this role. Maybe it's even at a higher level, but even if you can't get that title change, I think the compensation should be at that next level. And you bundle in all of the different arguments that you have there. And then you'll probably do one or two more rounds of negotiations. That's the counter part of it. In the case of any negotiation, 4 ingredients have to be there. You have to be likable. They have to think you deserve it. They have to think you're justified and be able to justify that internally, especially to comp committees at big companies. And you have to feel winnable. These are just incredibly important things to make sure you do, especially when you're counter offering. So it's very possible for you to be firm and specific. I want these numbers for these reasons. But at the same time, when you're having that conversation with the recruiter, you say, thank you so much. You're one of the best recruiters I've worked with. You got me this far. Thanks for advocating to me. You need to be likable. Second, you need to be deserving. So that's where you put the justification in. And they need to feel through the interview process that you actually crushed it. Justification is on paper, objective things. I'm going to be driving this impact. I'm going to be having this many people as scope. Or one of the best things I use for an up-level request. Very often hiring managers are, what does a title matter? We don't care about titles here. You don't need to be a director if you're a senior PM, or you don't need to be a VP. Senior director is fine. You're going to have scope. It's not true. Titles have, except for firms like OpenAI or Stripe, where it's just head of for everyone. It's very flat. In companies, it matters a lot. You can't get things done as easily as a principal, as a director, when you're at any company, either with external partners or internal partners, or even your team. They will go above your head and try to find decisions to be made. And that's the best argument by far I've seen for getting a title bump. You're saying, I need to do this level of scope. I need to win over these people. They're going to respect me if I have this title. So I need that title. So that's justification, just having a very clear argument that's hard to argue with for the committee, and then be winnable. So if they think you're using them as leverage, or you're not super excited about the role, that's why I say be excited about the role, neutral about the offer, then they're not going to fight for you. We'll give them an offer, but I have to expend political capital. I have to go to the comp committee, get approvals from a CFO. It's not worth it because I don't think this candidate's going to accept. So just make sure that they know if you get the right numbers that, hey, this is one of your top choices or the top choice. Sorry, that was a very long version of it, but those are very important ingredients to negotiating well.
Should you always ask for more? What if, when you look at the market data and when you think about your other conversations that you've had, they're already coming in high?
I have seen this very frequently, that they'll say, I've topped everything out. You have so many conversations during the process. They're like, we're going to top you out. We're doing everything we can. We're getting all these approvals. We're giving you the best offer possible on the first chance. And then you look at the data on levels that FYI, and it's the top offer. I would say more than 50% of the time when you push back and ask for more, they end up giving you more. Even if it's in those rare cases where you're way top of band already and you know that, it's very rare that you actually don't get more if you ask for more. And I have not seen anyone get it pulled. If they're giving you top of band, you're not a candidate that they're going to be F you if you ask for more. They really want you. It's usually the candidates that are either unlikable or they feel as a risk, or it's a very rare instance where the market is so tight, they have 5 candidates behind you and it feels very stressful when you're just on the edge. So it really depends the distance between you and the next candidate there. But if they're giving you a top of market thing, it's at least fine to ask. And they might say no. They say, we cannot give you more. We're already at 950 for an L7 and we can't go higher at Meta. That happened a couple of times, but that's fine. At least you asked, right? Because I've definitely had other times where they're, oh yeah, okay, we'll give you 1.1 million, right? Instead of 950. And I don't know what makes the difference between the two sometimes, honestly. You make the same case, you do the same pitch, but at least you give yourself a shot at it.
So generally plan on asking for more. Having hired people, I think sometimes the hiring manager isn't even the best to know and the recruiter isn't even the best to know, because I've been wanting to hire somebody on my team. We work on a round or two of negotiation. They still come back with another, and I think, oh my gosh, even I can't go bat for them. But my skip level them enough that they will get that. So sometimes just what's available, we don't even realize.
It's so true. And this is why I say not that 30, 60, 90. I do it with the hiring manager first because you don't want to go over their heads, just like you wouldn't. But then sometimes I get them to go to the skip level. And it depends on who your hiring manager is. There's a couple of reasons why you'd go to the skip. One, the hiring manager just doesn't have that political edge and that confidence to know how to go to bat for you. You can sense that out. Is this the type of person who knows how to pitch you to the comp team and will fight for you? In that case, go to the skip. Or if they're just at a low level that isn't going to help, if they're a director and you're going for an L7 role, the directors don't have as much sway as the senior director and definitely not the VP. So if you can get in front of that VP and do that pitch again, do that 30, 60, 90, you ask them questions about the role, you frame it as I'm doing a reverse interview because that is half of the reason you're doing it. You can convince that person can go to bat for you and will have much more sway. And yeah, I totally agree with that. If you're in executive roles for hypergrowth companies, so going way down to the startup level, the decision makers aren't just even the executive team. It's the board of directors that have to sign off on equity packages and things like that at the executive level. Know that. Understand early on, does the board know that I'm in the process now? Try to get that out of the executive recruiter if you can, or even top down, or hey, what does the board think about this position and what they want for it? And then at the end, you might even talk to someone on the board and just give them that little push that like you would be asking them questions about, oh, is the company, what's your vision for the company? They'll to do that to pitch executive candidates, but it's also an opportunity for you to get them to be an advocate for you in the negotiation process.
Is there such a thing as pricing yourself too high? I had a couple of people write that recently where they're like, you know what? I don't want to negotiate. Thanks for the advice, but I just don't want to make my job at risk. I just don't want to be a target.
Oh, yes. I come into the job and I'm being paid so much that I'm going to be the first one out if they do a layoff, right?
Yes, especially at those layoff-prone companies. I've had multiple people tell me stuff like this, the Amazons and Metas, where they just keep seeming to have wave after layoff. Yeah, I don't want to negotiate because I don't want to be the high band person who's performing low band and all of a sudden get cut.
Yeah. Part of it is your confidence level. I think these are, by the way, these are fairly niche scenarios, but they are real. I would say that in those cases, the people that are getting laid off sometimes are the first in, first out people who have high band offers, but it's usually because they're not able to make an impact. And sometimes that's out of your control. So I get why you'd be concerned about it. And you can weigh that in. You can figure out like, is this the manager that's really going to go to bat for me or the one that's going to put me up for a layoff? But usually those layoffs happen for people who have like huge equity increases. They've been around for like 3 or 4 years and they try to get rid of those folks who they owe a lot of money to on the equity vesting side due to appreciation. So it's not always the case. I think it's probably a little overblown. It was definitely the case when they were doing the mass layoffs in 2023. They picked all the people that were making the most cut, right? But the layoffs now are a little bit more about, some of it's about cost cutting, but it's a little bit more about their at least premise is let's raise the bar. So if people aren't performing really well and maybe they're paid the highest, those are the two factors that go into the ranking of who's going to get laid off. But should you not negotiate in that case? I think that's a little ridiculous. You might get laid off either way. If you're increasing your chances from 50% to 70%, I don't know. You make the choice whether you don't want to negotiate. But in my opinion, you should do it. You can't control what's going to happen after that.
Both feel the confident archetype. But now that I've worked with the less confident archetype, I have a lot of respect for it, also as a founder too. Now, if somebody has a big salary on my team, I am thinking about, are they generating the value? If somebody has a small salary on my team, I'm just like, yeah, I'm happy to keep them around. They have good vibes.
It's very true. Yeah. And if you're a startup, I think it's very interesting. It always seems to be this bimodal thing, right? It's like the big tech companies where they try to cut those super overpaid people. And then, yeah, startups, when runway starts becoming tight, who are you going to cut? Is that head of sales really bringing people in as much to be worth all the crazy incentives we gave to just bring them on board, all those sweeteners? Is he worth that retention bonus, that 1 year retention bonus? Yeah, those things are real for sure. In my opinion, though, if you feel this is a very strong fit of a role, if you believe in the company, then negotiating for what you actually are worth in that company is totally fine. And does that mean you have to penny pinch every single last drop out of it? Probably not. You can do 1, 2 rounds, maybe 3 rounds of negotiations, depending on the number of choices you have and how confident you feel in your next role if things don't work out. I think the much more common scenario is that people are just afraid to negotiate and they don't want to, or they're afraid they're going to burn bridges. And couldn't be further from the truth. If you do a good negotiation, you actually have more respect from the people. But yeah, I totally get where you're coming from. Yeah, sometimes, yeah, you become a target if you have a very big price tag on your head.
I myself have found giving people sometimes that advice. They'll just be, yeah, I have a $1.2 million offer and I want to go for 1.5. And I'm just like, is that going to make any difference to your life at all? But it is going to put a bigger target on your back.
That's so funny. Yeah, no, I definitely have heard this. And this is actually very common. I've heard it from candidates at the level of that level. Usually it's around the 900,000 plus level. When they start being $100,000 isn't going to make a big difference for me. I'd rather just make this smooth sailing and come into the role. And I respect that decision. The reason I started doing the negotiation coaching is because there's so much variance, not based on merit, for people's negotiation. And it's not going to change the way that the market is set up right now. It's all about price discovery. What is this person's intersection of very unique skills tied to this role and our need right now in this market condition? What is that price? And that price discovery only comes through negotiation. So I feel that needs to happen for most people. There are definitely edge cases where people are, I'm cool with not negotiating. I was just talking to a guy who was going to Google for some very big role, and he was scared of negotiating. We looked on the bands and levels of FYI, what he wanted was already $250K above that. And I was, yeah, you know what? It's worth trying. Go for it. If that's what's going to make you happy to join them and you're going to feel really good about that role and not be looking around elsewhere, then just let them know that. We did the negotiation. He got more than what he asked for, which was very surprising. He's probably the most paid person in that space. And maybe we'll see if he has a target on his back in the future. But in the end, the process was really good for him. But his initial reaction at the beginning was, I don't want to burn bridges with this person that I know really who's hiring me. I would say it's very personal kind of decision. But in 90+% of the cases, I would say people should negotiate.
Yeah, most people are under negotiating. And especially, I have to call out, if you're a woman, in my experience, the data has proven it out in my real life experience too. The men out there are confident. They're calling. They're just, let's go. Let's ask for more money. So you have to consider what your competition is doing. And the majority of people do ask for money. Having hired lots of PMs, I would say 80 to 90% of the people I hired negotiated. So you should go in realizing 90% of people are negotiating.
Yeah, I would say there's 3 main if you're thinking, should I negotiate or why should I negotiate? I'm happy, it's a good income, whatever. There's 3 main reasons. The first one is that it is the norm. More than half of PMs negotiate, for sure. And so it gets in this weird position as a hiring manager. So a lot of people ask me as a leader, why don't you change it? Why don't you just give a fair market rate? First of all, there is no such thing as a fair market rate. It's very hard for each person. And I want to hire the best people, which means, and they're going to negotiate with me half the time. So I can't give them this crazy high number at the beginning. They're always going to ask for more. It's just what they do. And so it's this game theory end game of the negotiation has to happen. The other 50% of the people then are not negotiating when they totally could. And I'm expecting them to. So it's the norm. That's the first reason. The second reason, it makes a big difference over the long run. The difference in 10 to 20%, I see also the common increases I see, by the way, if you're thinking of how much more can I get, 15% to 40%. Those are the extremes. If you're getting only 7, 10%, unless you already had this crazy top of band offer to begin with, because you already set yourself up for that, it's usually 15 to 40%. The difference between that and the original offer with appreciation of equity over the course of 4 years can literally be $1 million, $2 million in some cases. It's pretty wild how much the difference can be, so that you're just missing out on that. And then the third thing is just that, honestly, you need to advocate for yourself. It's a skill that you have to build in your career. If you're not able to advocate for yourself here, then are you going to be able to advocate for your product when you're in your role? Are you going to be advocating for that promotion? Are you going to be advocating for your team when they need something. And it's just a skill and you have to break through it. You have to build that confidence. And the only way to do that is through reps.
For my personal negotiations, what I found was most important was negotiating on my team, because I always wanted to have the commitment that, hey, I'm going to be able to hire 4 PMs, right? I'm not going to be expected to just handle the job of 5 people, right? If we have 4 engineering teams, which is often what happens for growth product leaders, or this is the revenue we're going to generate. And once we generate this revenue, we're going to expand the team this amount, or this is the cost we're going to cut. And so once we're going to do that, and I think tying it to those numbers around your 30, 60, 90-day plan and showing them the ROI is another very important area for leaders to negotiate, because the worst thing to do is you think you're going in to go hire a team, but they don't have the budget for you to do that.
Yep. No, totally never been there before. Yeah. So I actually call this total offer value. And a lot of people just focus on total compensation, but it's only one part of what you're negotiating for, right? So that's the dollar numbers, including equity, right? Then there's what I call career skip prep. So are you negotiating to make sure that this role is going to set you up to get promoted in the future, right? Are you getting the right project, the right buy-in internally? Are they almost pre-committing for it? I would not use that in lieu of total compensation, because it's very easy to make promises and then take them back later. But make sure that you're getting a position that is actually going to be good for your next role, whether at that company or externally. Title and level, very big. Level is probably the biggest one because it's very hard to make up level. Title can be really important for getting things done internally. Like I said, having the respect of your partners or external customers, as well as important for your career in the long term. Next, lifestyle, locale, hours. I've seen a lot of people. I went through an entire recruitment process where you have to work in New York City. All the PMs are in New York City. We're not changing this. And I was, all right, this is going to be a hard family decision. Let's just go through it. Got to the end. Got the offer and I can't move to New York City. And they were, okay, let's just do it remote. 2 months later, 1/3 of the product team were remote. After that, I did that. So being able to negotiate for a locale, or if it's a certain kind of travel schedule or hybrid or whatever it is, just make sure your lifestyle is part of it. Then making sure, if you're more senior at the executive level, there are very special things that you can ask for, or even if you're just a senior, well-known candidate, making sure you're protected on severance. There are layoffs happening all the time. If you've been through 2 or 3 hypergrowth companies, you know that things might not work out, especially earlier stage stuff. But you can actually pre-negotiate your severance if you have a high negotiation position or you're a more senior candidate. There's also acceleration clauses.
Actually, can we more about that? Because I don't think many people do that, and more should. What is negotiating severance? What is a reasonable amount to negotiate?
Yeah, so it varies, and it varies on your position. But generally, you can get whatever you think that the severance is going to be for a very modern big tech company. They usually have pretty generous severance. It could be 3 months, 6 months, 8 months, 12 months, 18 months, depending on all the way up to executive level. And so you have to figure out where you are in that ranking. Oh, and honestly, what you need. And you can ask for that. And if you ask for more, they can give you less, the typical negotiation game, but it's worth asking for it. And you just have to make sure that you're doing it. I would do it in person. And I would just make sure that they understand where you're coming from, that this is from your experience, that you understand the market. If you just ask for it and as throwing it in, they're to say no, but you can get people to empathize with you on why you're doing it. They just need to know that it's from a genuine place. But asking for a guaranteed 6-month severance, if a layoff happens or something like that happens in the next 12 months, or even in the next 12 to 48 months, it's very common. Especially, it's more common in executive level, but I'm seeing it more and more in the senior level roles now.
Okay, it's in the case of layoff, so it's not in the case of if you're underperforming.
For executives, it can be actually, unless it's some severe cause, right? So it can be for underperformance for sure, the severance. You just have slightly different bargaining positions depending on your seniorities. You can ask for it. If the company's going to struggle and there's going to be layoffs and my role's going to be eliminated, I guarantee this severance. If it's a high risk role, I'm coming in to launch this new thing and it has very specific goals, then you might actually ask for, hey, if we don't perform on these goals and it just doesn't work out and you fire me, I need severance for that, just because I'm willing to take this risk versus going to a bigger or more established company with a longer run rate. And I've seen that succeed. It's honestly 50-50 or less for people who are at junior levels, but it's very worthwhile to ask for it.
Yeah, I think not enough people know about this, but almost all C-suite execs negotiate this. Because as we know, CPOs have really short tenures, and unfortunately VPs of product do too. And I think a lot of VPs of product probably can negotiate this, but aren't.
Yeah, if you're senior director, if you're definitely VP plus, you should negotiate it. I had a VP tell me recently, part of this VP in hypergrowth kind of career One of the realities you just realize is that all the paths, even the successful paths, usually end up to you leaving the company. At some point, if the company grows out of you or something happens that you leave the company, it's very rare that a VP early on will stay forever. And so you just have to plan for that inevitability. Much of it is outside your control. So definitely negotiate for severance, especially if you're in a leadership role.
And then you were talking about acceleration clauses.
Yeah. One more note on severance before we go into acceleration clauses. So if you're negotiating for severance, you feel maybe your negotiation coach, if you're using someone who's not familiar with that kind of thing, very often you can go to what are called compensation lawyers in places like Silicon Valley, et cetera. They're very used to doing this for executives, but you could probably hire them for $1,000 or something like that to review your contract, set up details of what you're going to ask for in terms of terms, and they can help you out with that. And that'll give you a little bit more confidence in going ahead and negotiating for it. Acceleration, change of control. So if the company is acquired, if leadership changes, gets fired, for example, if you get hired by a founder and that founder leaves, you're probably going to get fired. All of those things can happen. And you want to make sure that your equity is protected primarily. So very often you can ask for some of your compensation in cash for the next X months, but very quickly you can get your equity accelerated. So it could be 100% of your equity. It can be 75%, 50%. It depends on the cases. I would go through this with a negotiation coach or a lawyer if you're at the executive levels and making sure that you're asking for the right things. It also depends on your role in the company stage. But essentially, if the company gets acquired, if the leadership leaves, if the board fires the leader, if the company IPOs even, you want to make sure that you're protected in case after that event, you get laid off. And so sometimes this includes additional clauses. So for example, if I'm not at the company within 6 months after this event happens because I'm laid off or for whatever, if I decide to leave because my role has changed significantly, then I get all my equity or I get my equity plus a whole bunch of severance. So that's a very common thing for executives to negotiate, and very few people know about it until they get to that level.
Okay. As an executive, as you reach these levels, talk to your friends, pay for advice, look at colonized content, but the game changes. And I think a lot of people don't realize that. Are there other dimensions of negotiation that the game is changing as you move up?
Yeah, it's a very good question. So one of the things I didn't get to is exactly what you said. Negotiating for scope and resource guarantees, guaranteed headcount, guaranteed budget, guaranteed ownership of certain projects. You can actually put that in your contract when you get to the higher levels, or at least have handshake deals about those things. And that's really important. If you know that, for example, this happens with growth leaders a lot, because with growth, you just have a certain number of things you need to do, and you need a certain number of people to get those things done. And if you don't have them, it's just not going to happen. And so you just need to make sure that you have those things guaranteed, and that's part of the negotiated scope. That sometimes will then lead to you getting guarantees from the CFO, or there's other background things happen there. In terms of other things that happen at the negotiation level, it becomes much more in person, much more informal. I know a lot of folks to do negotiations entirely over email, but when you're at the top executive level, it's almost seen as unprofessional to do it. They want to jump on a phone call with you for almost every single detail, and it's almost unavoidable. At the director level, you can probably get away with it, maybe at the VP, depending on the size of the company. But yeah, it just becomes much more in person and about being more collaborative. You're on the side of them. You're trying to creatively come to something that is going to work for both of you. And sometimes that includes compensation. Sometimes that includes, can we change the role level? Should this role actually be a VP or a CXO? Those types of things. And the only way you're going to get to that type of change is by being collaborative. And sometimes that means sometimes I've seen people fly in and talk to people in person to work out an offer and make sure that everything is done. But yeah, in general, it's fairly similar. It's just the elements of the role of the compensation, the severance clauses, accelerations, those types of things that become more important.
Okay, so we walked everybody through the life cycle. The final element you talked a little bit about, but that's where I want to end the cycle of the job search is reneging and continuing the job search when you have an offer. I think that most people don't realize that these are even options or things that they should consider because they're just honest stand-up PMs who they don't job search very often, or they have never even had to do a real job search. Talk a little bit about those. Who should consider those? What are the pros and cons and strategies around this?
Yeah, so I'll tell you what happens. It's very hard for me to just tell everyone what they should do because this is a very personal, ethical question you have. And it's actually very contextual because it depends on what the other party is doing to make you do this, for example. But I've seen very common, if someone's given very high pressure situation where they have to sign or else, and they're waiting for other opportunities that might come along, then they will take that knowing that if that other opportunity comes along and it's more attractive, that they will either reopen the negotiation or renege on the offer and move on. And that's much more common now than it was 5 years ago. I would say probably about 10% of people back in 2017, when I first started talking to people about negotiations, would tell me they were even willing to do this or would even consider it. Now it's the majority of people. There's still quite a few people who are adamantly against it, and I totally get where you're coming from, but it's become more of the norm these days. And that's partly especially in the last couple of years, people have this anti-company bias because companies were reneging on offers all the time. In 2023, they would give you offers and then you're about to start. It's almost day one. They're like, oh, sorry, you don't have a role here anymore. And you're like, I just quit my other job. And what am I going to do now? I have to go on my job search. And I was hoping that I would get this role and have this money and this stability, and you swiped it from under me. It is less harmful to the company, unless we're a C-suite hire, right? It is less harmful for the company in that case. The other time I see reneging is that you are taking an offer at a company and there's nothing else that you have, or maybe you have some other opportunities that are coming down the line. And this could work, but it could be a disaster once I step in the door and realize how this is going culturally. And I've seen some big time executives jump into a role, and within the first week, they're no way. Other company, hey, do you have an offer for me? I quit first week. And their perspective and the perspective of their hiring executive was, if this is not going to work out, rip the Band-Aid off now. Don't wait around for 3-6 months just because you feel, hey, that's the right thing to do. We need to go out and find the right person ASAP and not waste time with you.
Yeah, I've seen actually the smartest career people I know have done that at least once in their career, where they leave a week in and it never makes it to their resume. And that's why I tell people, keep job searching until that kind of first week. And it doesn't mean that you ever need to do anything unethical or renege or anything. So you can just do it in a totally ethical way where you're just continuing to interview with other people and you keep those searches open. People always, when they sign the offer, they're all right, I'm closing all my other things. I don't have this rush. They're so sick of job searching after 6 months. I'm done with it. I got an offer Stripe. I got an offer this, but Stripe might pay you more. And this other place that you went to might have a crazy product culture that you don't know anything about. So just continue the process has been my advice these days.
That is great advice. And I think it's advice I've started to give, but I love that you formalized that. I would say, yeah, keep interviewing, especially if you have spidey senses about this company, some yellow flags about the company. Keep interviewing until you're at least a week on the job and you have a sense of what it's really from the inside, because you will get a pretty clear sense of whether this is going to be a place where you're going to be successful and want to spend the next months and years of your life.
And then the other thing I would say after the job search that most people don't realize, and we're talking to leaders here, is your job actually starts the day you sign the offer. So you should go start talking to customers. You should figure out everybody in your network who's a customer. You should go talk to them. You should be LinkedIn requesting your team and starting to meet your team. I think too many people, they want to start on day one, but the people who are successful, they're already coming into day one with 30 days of work.
Yeah, it's very interesting. I hear two things. I hear some people are just, if I don't take this break, I'm just not going to be able to do this job well. But those people don't tend to also correlate with the people who are A-type performers in general. They're people who are confident and good at their job, but they're not the top people. So yes, I agree. If you're a LeBron James, then you're going to sacrifice your family time to your Thanksgiving to go be in your hyperbolic chamber. I don't think it's that extreme. I think you should do the work ahead of time. And in fact, many founders actually expect you to, and they'll be like, yeah, let's jump on a call next week. And you're like, wait, I'm not starting for another month. Very common. And just realize that's the expectation, that you're going to hit the ground running on day one.
All right, Colin, this has been an amazing discussion with so many insights for me as someone. I wish I could just pick your brain for another 2.5 hours, but thank you so much. If people enjoyed this, where can they find you online and how can they help?
Yeah, the best places to find me are on LinkedIn under Colin Warnell, and you can find my Substack newsletter, toptechnewsletter.com. And if you're negotiating or coming close to an offer sometime soon, then go to feelvalued.co, and my company there will be able to take care of you. We've done over 200 of these combined between us, and yeah, would love to help you get a great offer.
Yeah, I can personally vouch. He can help you with your job search, with your negotiation. So support Colin. Thanks for listening to this podcast, everyone. See you at the next one.